We've talked a little bit about honeypots. Let's talk now about the risks to portable and wireless devices. And we all know that there are laptops, tablets, smartphones, little cell phones, mobile phones, whatever, PDAs. We don't tend to use the term PDA much anymore, the personal digital assistant. But there are all kinds of, and there are little tiny laptops called netbooks and little tablets and notepads and whatever. All of these, because they are wireless, have their risks. So if we're going to have wireless devices, we've got to have some controls in place. And I want to see, what is your security policy regarding wireless connectivity and wireless security? Do you have one? What is your security policy regarding approving wireless devices and approving wireless networks and approving people using this particular operating system on a smartphone as opposed to that particular operating system? And what have you done to lock down a Windows phone or an Android phone? And so these devices, you need to make sure that they're just approved and people aren't just using whatever, because now it becomes just a free-for-all. The devices also, because they're small, they can easily be stolen. They need to be stored properly. They need to be secured when not in use. Like laptops can have a physical lock that's connected to the chassis and bolted down to like a table. But otherwise, you can easily have these little things stolen or lost. I mean, I was in a crowd one time and someone picked my pocket and stole my phone right out of my pocket. And I had a very deep pocket and I didn't even notice. One time I went into a courtroom and I saw a judge walk in and his laptop was handcuffed to his hand until he actually sat down. So, I mean, you want to have a lot of security for these devices. Very, very frequently, you'll have maybe contract cleaning crews or whatever, or people who don't directly work for you. You have to be careful because we've heard plenty of stories in the news of night shift janitors stealing a laptop, not realizing they just wanted the laptop so they could have or sell it for a few $100s or whatever, not realizing that it had maybe millions of dollars worth of information on it, not caring about that either. I mean, there have been some high-profile cases of, personally identifiable information on a stolen laptop. There are government agencies that I won't name that will have to admit that in the course of a year, they'll have thousands of laptops stolen across the big agency. So we really have to control the security of these things. We have to realize that there's always a high risk of these things being stolen or just broken. What do you do about the data that's on them? And this is why we're using things like BitLocker, where the whole drive is encrypted and you have to access it through a chip on the motherboard. What are you doing in case it's stolen or damaged or whatever? I remember a high-profile story a few years ago about a vice president of a large organization who sold his own old phone on eBay and forgot to wipe out secret merger information where they were about to acquire another company. Man, I wish I'd bought that phone. That information would have been worth a whole lot. But so anyway, you have to have mechanisms to remotely wipe. So like email systems, if people are picking up email on their phones through an email system like, say, Microsoft Exchange, there will be policies to be able to remotely wipe stolen devices or have the drives always encrypted because of the risk of theft or of damage. So make sure that you have a wireless standards policy and that you have proper network security protocols that have been implemented for your wireless. So let's talk about wireless. Wireless is just a radio wave, albeit it's in the microwave band. And wireless, what we call wireless or Wi-Fi, actually shares an unlicensed spectrum, a part of the band called the Industrial, Scientific, and Medical, the ISM band. It's unlicensed, which means so long as you're not transmitting with too much power, any baby monitor, garage door opener, cordless phone, and your wireless device are all sharing a common band, which means huge amounts of interference. Now, there are tons of free and paid tools out there where you can install on a laptop or on a phone walk around and look for wireless access points or signal or just noise if you're just trying to set up a wireless access point. In the United States, we are allowed to use 11 channels. They overlap each other, channels 1 through 11. Some countries have 12, 13, and 14. So sometimes you're looking for the less noisy channels. Usually the ones on the far ends in the middle, like 1, 6, and 11, are the noisy ones. The ones sort of in the middle of those tend to be less noisy. So we can have performance issues, but this is a radio wave. Who knows who's listening in? If you're not using some form of encryption, we can just listen in and capture your whole transmission and reconstruct phone calls and reconstruct files that you send and capture passwords and usernames. So you got to realize that there are loads of security risks. Most users don't realize that wireless can go out quite a ways. It can go for miles with the right kind of antenna. And it's not just confined to 4 walls. Wireless is meant generally for short-range connectivity, but under the right conditions, it can go on. So we have the laptops and the mobile phones, but you can also, of course, have wireless routers and wireless switches. And wireless switches or routers that act as basically repeaters to get the wireless signal way out into the patio out there, or way out into the courtyard or the terrace, or way out to another part of the building. So when we talk about wireless security, there are some security mechanisms, and that's what you want to define in your wireless security policy. One of the simplest ones is to hide the service set identifier, the SSID. Now, that's like putting a 2-foot fence around your perimeter. But basically, what an SSID is it's the workgroup name of the wireless access point. So if you ever just look for hotspots you can connect to, and you'll see Linksys, Boingo, ATT Wi-Fi, some airport name, some hotel name, the name of your department, whatever, and you make a connection. That's the SSID. And the presumption is if we don't transmit the name, because basically a wireless access point will send out what's called a beacon. It'll periodically transmit the name saying, "Hi, I'm here, and my name's Linksys. Come and connect to me." If we don't allow it to send out the beacons, then you figure then we can't connect to it. Like I said, it's a 2-foot high fence. There are plenty of tools, Backtrack being one of them, where you can just grab all wireless traffic off the air, and just every wireless frame transmitted will have the SSID embedded in it anyway. So that's not much of a security mechanism, and certainly don't depend on it. The only things we really can do are using good encryption. There are many types of encryption. There's the old Wired Equivalent Privacy, WEP, W-E-P. WEP long ago has been crackable. There are plenty of tutorials that'll take you by the hand step by step on how to crack a WEP key. You can crack a 128-bit WEP key in 10 minutes. In security classes, I demo it sometimes. So that's been replaced by something called WPA, which basically addressed some of the weaknesses. WEP had no way of stamping each individual frame. It was a weak implementation of the RC4 algorithm, so it was easy. If you captured enough, it was easy to start guessing the key. So WPA started to address some of those weaknesses. Then WPA went on to be something called WPA 2. We have an enterprise version where when you connect to the wireless, you actually have to authenticate to a radius server before the wireless lets you on the network. That's what we see all the time in hotspots and places like at airports and hotels. And there's also WPA2 personal. We don't have a radius server that does the authentication. Instead, we just use a little password, a pre-shared key. But we have all the strength otherwise of WPA2. The problem with using the stronger ones is that not all wireless clients can support it. These days, most wireless devices support WPA2, but every once in a while you'll have to go down to something a little bit weaker, like WEP. All of these, one way or another, ultimately, because you're transmitting radio, have their weaknesses. Like WPA, I can't crack the encryption very effectively, but I can go through passwords in a dictionary attack. Or WPA2, if we are not careful about how we store the keys or how we store control to the radius server, they all have weaknesses. So we want to see the policy, we want to see how it was implemented, how well it was implemented. Here's a typical wireless network, actually a very small, like a small office, home office network. You've got a wireless router or switch, probably a router. You can get just wireless switches. It might be connected to yet another switch, and you've got desktops. Some desktops plug straight into the wireless router because most wireless routers have like a couple of switch ports in the back as well. Some of them, you'll have an external switch and you'll have a whole bunch of desktops and printers and whatever plugged into it. And then this thing, of course, has antennas, 1 or 2 antennas, and you'll have the phones and the laptops and the tablets and the wireless devices connecting to it. This wireless router then connects to your cable modem, DSL modem, whatever, and then that connects you to the internet. So a very classic sort of wireless network. All of these have inherent risks and inherent vulnerabilities. Default passwords, default usernames, not protected, not configured very carefully, unpatched applications, operating system that has not been hardened and locked down, wireless connections that are not using stronger protocols or passwords. So we have risks with all of those. The next thing we're going to talk about is Bluetooth.